Here at Black Flag Armory, we believe wholeheartedly in personal responsibility. In this first section, we're going to cover 4 rules of firearm safety that were put into place by Colonel Jeff Cooper. Starting with safety is foundational for all things firearms. Whether you choose to own one or not, knowing how to properly handle a firearm and to make sure that it's safe and unloaded is going to be beneficial for everybody, no matter the circumstance. Here I have a Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 compact. You can see I have a chamber flag in this. That's because I've already checked the gun and run this piece of plastic down it to make sure that there's no ammunition in it. This is the same firearm that I'm going to be handling throughout the entire video. It is empty. I can visually and physically check that chamber, and I can rack it a few times, and it's empty as well. Throughout the rest of the video, of course, I'm not going to even insert a magazine, and we'll be using this same firearm to make sure that there's no ammunition present. So the first rule of firearm safety is to treat all guns as if they were loaded, right? Even though I've checked multiple times that this firearm is in fact empty, I'm still going to treat it as though it were loaded. That way, if something were to happen, if I hadn't checked this gun previously, or if somebody hands me a new firearm or I come across one, I'm not doing anything unsafe with it right from the get-go before I've determined whether or not the gun is loaded. The second rule of firearm safety is to never let the muzzle cover anything that you're not willing to destroy. And the muzzle is the front end of the firearm where the bullets exit the barrel, right? And so you might notice that when I'm holding this, I'm holding the muzzle this way, I'm pointing it up, rotating it, holding it this way. And that's because in this case, if you were a person, not a camera, I'm never actually crossing you with this muzzle. I'm not pointing the firearm at you. That goes for anyone, anything that you don't want to destroy, including yourself. So when you're checking out firearms, when you pick them up at a store, you always want to be aware of where that muzzle is pointed. A lot of people actually recommend visualizing a laser or something coming straight line out of your muzzle at all times. So in this case, I'm crushing and destroying my walls, my ceiling, my lights. And what that does for us in terms of keeping us safe is even if the firearm were loaded, even if you violated all other safety rules, you put your finger on the trigger, you pulled the trigger before you intended to, and the gun was loaded, if your muzzle never crossed anyone or anything else, and you accidentally fired the firearm, then you wouldn't accidentally shoot something that you didn't intend to. So that's the second rule, and it's really, really, really important. All 4 of these rules are important, but if everything else goes wrong, making sure you're aware of where that muzzle is pointed will help keep people safe. The third rule is to keep your finger off of the trigger until you're ready to fire. And you might notice that when I've been handling this gun, when I pick it up, my index finger, which would normally be used to pull the trigger and fire the gun, has been resting along the side of the firearm's frame this entire time. As long as I'm not pulling that trigger, this gun cannot fire. So even again, if every other safety rule were violated, if I allowed the gun to be loaded without my knowing and I didn't check it, if I pointed the muzzle at something that I shouldn't, if I don't touch that trigger and I don't pull that trigger, the gun will not fire. The fourth rule of firearm safety is to know your target and what's beyond it. So imagine that you're going shooting and you've done everything else right. You've treated your firearm as though it's loaded, you've never let the muzzle cover anything you're not willing to destroy, and you've kept your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. At this point, you have the gun out, there's a target in front of you that you intend to shoot. You're going for target practice. In this last step, you want to be sure of what it is you're shooting at, as well as what's beyond that target, right? Because that round is going to travel a long way really, really, really quickly and with a lot of energy and force. And so you want to be sure that if it penetrates through the target or you miss the target, that you're not striking anything that you didn't intend to. Observation of these 4 rules are really designed to help make sure that no one is accidentally injured with a firearm. And knowing just these basic things can help you be safe whether you choose to own a firearm or not, and it also is something that you can teach your children and anyone you know so that they too can handle a firearm without knowing anything about the way it operates safely. So I'll go ahead and recap those 4 rules real quick and we'll get moving on. The first rule of firearm safety is to treat all firearms as though they're loaded. The second is to never let your muzzle cover anything that you're not willing to destroy. Third is to keep your finger off of that trigger until you're ready to fire. And the fourth is to know your target and what's beyond it, so that in case it penetrates the target or you miss, nothing is accidentally damaged. All right, let's move on to the next section.